But I will just say as a pin, and I remember saying this to Michael, about the religious stuff, is that like I'm all for inviting folks in, but if you haven't had like a real discussion with a very, very religious person, particularly one on the right side, in a few years, you quickly forget how bad it can get. And I remember having that experience when I came back home and having the classic somebody trying to save me. And like, I understand it was very nice, they were saving you from hell. But there is also something extremely insulting when somebody's telling you that they think that the way that you're living, the things that you believe are like, the bottom of the barrel, like the worst things that you can think, right? And I think it's worthwhile to push back against that. And I do think that sometimes we've lost that, on the left at least, how important, like, atheism was, especially for people who grew up and lived in more traditionally, conservative Christian parts of the country, that it was a very freeing thing and continues to be something freeing. So just like, because you're not experiencing that where you're at, doesn't mean that it still doesn't exist for folks. But hell of a lot to get to. We got Orwell and Hitchens. We got a little Dan Crenshaw. And again, we'll be taking people's questions from the chat, but also voicemails. So join us on patreon.com/leftreckoning and get access to the voicemail. The book is by Ben Burgis, Christopher Hitchens. What he got right, how he went wrong, and why he still matters. You can get it everywhere. You can get it at Red Emma's. We have a link down below to the book through Red Emma's. You can also get it through our bookshop link. So the money goes to your local bookstore. Is there anything that I'm missing before we run over to the other side?
Well, we want to be we'll be drinking some Johnny Walker. No, I had some. I haven't been drinking a whole lot this pandemic, but I have a fresh bottle here. This is probably my most drunk alcohol of my lifetime, and it's because Christopher Hitchens, as lame as that is to say, like Johnny or Jack Daniels may be close, but I've bought so many bottles of this back when I was a little college columnist at Minnesota State University, being like, oh, what should I write about this week? Oh, okay, well, just pour me another. And yeah, that's.
I remember trying to get people to buy that for me when I was like 19, which I have to say might be cool, and also one of the nerdiest things ever, trying to get somebody to buy you alcohol.
Because you're doing like the classic, like teenager standing outside of the liquor store, like begging like an adult to like buy them. But like it's like every other teenager in the world, it's like, can you get beer or like I don't know, maybe can you get vodka even? But
Keystones,
like,
yeah.
But it's like can you give me Johnny Walker Black? Because that's what Christopher Hitchens drinks. All right, that was a little sample of the epic 5-hour-long appearance that I ended up doing on Left Reckoning last week. It's like a, I don't know, hour and a half of the main show, but the maybe less, but the rest, like there was definitely at least 3 hours of the post game. But that line made me laugh very hard, so I wanted to use that as the cold open. David Griscom standing outside a liquor store trying to get people to buy him Johnny Walker Black because he was underage.
It sounds like a cartoon I got to draw.
That definitely sounds like a cartoon that you have to draw. So we are going to be talking a little bit of Christopher Hitchens in the philosophy segment with Professor Jennifer Burgis at the end of the show. After that, on a related thing for the post game for patrons, we are going to have comedian Ethan Hershenfeld on, and we're going to subject him to some clips from Ben Shapiro and William Lane Craig. Yeah, it's going to be fun. But the main guest tonight is going to be Slavoj Zizek for his fourth appearance on the show, 3 on the main show, but I think 4 if you count the time he came on for part of the debate breakdown for the Zizek Peterson debate. So
checks out.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that's going to be a lot of fun. That part is pre-recorded because it is like 3 a.m. in Slovenia, and the man is not like staying up to do that. So that's pre-recorded. Everything else is live. So there's some confusion about that in the chat, but so I do want to start playing that by about 8:30 or so. So so we can finish the main show at some approximation of 10 we're supposed to. So yeah, want to be in Slovenia in 20 minutes or so, but thinking about Hitchens and his political evolution, devolution. I started thinking about other people who have started out as leftists and have ended up somewhere else. Now, in Hitchens' case, I think it's actually a pretty interesting journey, because I think that even though I think his late foreign policy positions were tragically misguided, although it's also weird because even on foreign policy, he still had positions on Palestine and torture and surveillance that were way better than you would think. And there were a lot of other leftist things he continued to think. So that, it's one of many things that make me think something more interesting is going on there. But of course, that is not the typical situation for people who make a big deal of having left the left. So I was talking about this with our producer, Jake Abbott, earlier, and he started talking about some classic clips of people who have made that journey, and so I thought we'd start out with one of them.
Yeah, we have some heavy hitters of the left that unfortunately left the left, right? So we could start out with PragerU was kind enough to record a video essay detailing some of these folks' journeys. So I think we should check out and see if they are leaving the left for valid reasons or not.
Sounds good.
Have you ever heard the old saying that a conservative is just a liberal who got mugged? Well, I got mugged to the tune of $60,000 a year. It's called tuition.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Like everyone who cons themselves into attending a liberal arts college, I was...
I know we're less than 20 seconds in, but I'm confused. She left the... I agree. She was mugged by the college tuition, but, what am I missing here, guys?
I guess to be fair, I don't know what she started as, so we're gonna see. I don't know if she was an anarcho-syndicalist or something, but college made her a conservative. So I guess to deal with the problem of high tuition somehow, becoming a conservative is gonna hold the answers for her.
I don't know. I'm a simple man. I just tend to think that Bernie Sanders wanted to eliminate college tuition, have tuition-free public higher education. So if you think tuition's being mugged, maybe that would be your guy. I certainly don't understand how that would lead to being a conservative, but maybe it'll start making more sense.
All right, let's see.
I was captivated by the idea of changing the world. I would immerse myself in a diverse pool of academic thought, theory, and action. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. Over the course of 4 years, I was transformed from a plucky, free-thinking, free spirit into a cranky, get-off-my-lawn conservative. The process started not long after I arrived at my elite East Coast school. I thought I was there to expand my knowledge of the world, to debate the great ideas. I soon realized, however, that my professors had something else in mind. Invariably, each class followed the same monotonous ritual. Identify a problem, say racism, blow it up beyond all proportion, blame the problem on the white majority culture, and then offer an unworkable solution, usually involving the government. Everywhere I turned, I saw political correctness. At first, I just rolled with it. Then I got annoyed. Then it started to tick me off. I was being brainwashed, indoctrinated, and I was paying for the privilege with borrowed money. Almost every speaker who came to campus was a leftist journalist, a leftist activist, or a leftist professor.
Okay, I just want to stop there because Tucker Max came to my school, Johns Hopkins, while I was there, and we had we didn't exactly have Noam Chomsky every other day coming to speak for our events. I'm just very curious what school they went to, but that just
I will say at Western Michigan University in either 2004 or 2005. I'm very old. We had Pat Buchanan come speak once memorably.
No liberal Pat Buchanan.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, maybe maybe they have a boring list of speakers at whatever rich kid school she went to, but it seems to me there are a lot of American colleges that do in fact have a wide range of people come speak.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like, I don't remember my formal logic class being like, and the answer to this one is found in government intervention because of to deal with the white majority. I mean, more classes like that would have been cool. Honestly, I wish I had more classes like that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, not even my formal logic classes included that, so I can't really imagine that anybody else's did.
Yeah, actually, I have seen this video, so I'm very excited for people to see her description of who came to her college. Let's get back to it.
And what's her name? Michelle Malkin, I think, came once also. So again, some non leftists on that list.
Tell me, Ben. Maybe college has changed a little bit since you went, but tell me after we watch her cavalcade of campus speakers if it was anything similar to yours.
Okay.
Professor from another leftist school. The ones who weren't leftists were just weird. One time, I attended a film lecture given by a very skilled paraplegic adult film star who showed us some of her art. Another time, I went to a performance given by a woman who engaged in autoeroticism behind a curtain. I couldn't deal with it. The PC culture, the mono-thinking, the weirdness. I needed some way to cope. So I got high almost every day. Parenthetically, most of the worst stoners I knew are now working in finance or politics. In fact, this is what made me first realize that I was a fan of limited government. I do not trust these goofs to make policy. Their power must be constrained.
Oh my God. Like, if you're trying, like, some of these videos you can predict what the fuck is about to happen, but try to, every sentence after the next just gets more and more. Like, she had the keys to the most amazing college experience I've ever heard, and she just threw it away.
I know. I mean, like, I went to art school, and I don't remember any of that kind of stuff happening. I mean, like, yeah, no, it happened in the dorm rooms. I mean, trust me, I was there for some of that, but
Sure.
not as a performance. I mean, geez.
Yeah, it's also weird because, I mean, okay, yes, first of all, none of the college, I mean, I went to a bunch of colleges, right? Like, none of them, undergrad, master's, PhD, like, none of those places had any events nearly as cool as what she's describing. But also it's, and also I thought it was kind of funny that even the ones who weren't leftists, so I guess the paraplegic adult film star maybe was Republican, but would be a good twist. But otherwise, like, okay, notice that she's like tut-tutting about the adult film star just before she says that she hated the like PC monoculture, right? So like she's like trying to have it both ways here. That's like both like, oh, people are running wild and they can do whatever they want and it's awful and I want this stuff to be censored.
Yeah,
and
there's two things I hate: PC culture and weirdness. Like, it reminds me of the like Austin Powers joke of like, I hate people who discriminate against other cultures and the Dutch. Like, what do you? Exactly. So what do you want? Like,
right? Yeah, I hate censorship and monoculture, and events that seem too weird. Those are the three things that I can't stand. Exactly. Okay. I'm also. It's also a little unclear. She's a fan of limited government, but. I would think the natural follow-up would be, and therefore I understand that nobody should be arrested for doing what these people are doing. But that's not where she seems to be going with this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I'm it's funny to think about the person who's like taking notes on this, who's like following her logic of like, I mean, obviously it's going for an emotional response, I guess. It's really just for people who are like, okay, college is filled with heathens, is basically like the audience, I'm guessing. All right.
Which sounds great. I go back to school if that's true.
Yeah, I don't deny the weirdness.
I want to go to this school.
When she said college is filled with weirdness, I definitely I'm like mea culpa.
Sign me back up.
This brings me to another black hole in the college experience: useless majors, the only thing more pervasive than marijuana and irresponsible future leaders. I'm not being judgmental here. I have a degree in film and media studies and political science. Why did I choose them? They're subjects I like talking about. Practical, right? But I wasn't alone. Most of my peers also chose to spend their student loan money on subjects better learned on YouTube or Turner Classic
Wait, what was
Movies.
that? What was that thesis?
By the time graduation approached, none of us had developed any actual job skills. And people want to raise taxes to pay for free college for everyone? Are you kidding me? No.
Okay, so on the one hand, all of the pot smoking layabouts she knew from college have like awesome jobs now, right? I heard that earlier, that that they're like some of the most powerful people in the country. And on the other hand, nobody graduated with any job skills. I mean, I'm struggling with that one a little bit.
So if you, in order to write your, what was it, like Star Trek spoken weed thesis, I guess she's saying you'd be better off watching Turner Classic Movies to get the high.
Do they cover that in Turner Classic Movie?
Yeah, it was like a weird, like, this is strengthening my thesis that this is for old people. Like, who watches, like my dad and I watch a lot of TCM when I'm home, you know what I mean? So I think there's some blatant pandering going on, because I don't know anyone under the age of like 60 that is like really into TCM, even though they do have some good old.
No,
there's some good movies on there.
I have nothing bad to say on Turner Classic Movies, but I also don't think that she would learn what she wanted to about weed Star Trek from TCM. Also, notice that the video started with college costs too much. And the thing she just said before we paused was, oh my God, people want to make college free so everybody can do this? Never. Like, you just like.
Yeah, I think it's heading toward like abolish college. I think that's like where I think that's where that's my guess.
We just shouldn't have college. That's going to be.
I think that's kind of what they're going for.
Oh, right. Okay. So the solution
just have trade schools.
And have TV networks and trade schools to teach you the relevant content. She's an abolitionist, I think. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's because otherwise it's confusing, right? Like does it cost too much, or should it cost a lot of money and the government shouldn't help at all? Should there be something in between this and free college? But I understand now, right? We're just going to declare PragerU year zero and get rid of all the eggheads.
Well, the only university will be Prager University, right? That'll be the only school. Yeah, because you're right. There's like an implicit premise that college would be good if it prepared you for the right stuff, but it doesn't. So, all right.
Wait, what job skills do I get from watching PragerU videos?
I think for stand-up comedy.
Okay.
All right. Let's finish up the video.
Just no. I'd only give a free education to a smart kid who promised to get a degree in whatever the exact opposite of my degree is. And that degree didn't come cheap. I took on tens of thousands of dollars of debt, but never spent a minute learning how to manage it. No such classes were even offered. I might have actually learned something useful if they had been. I didn't learn about taxes either, other than that the rich should pay their fair share. It was only after college, when I was lucky enough to get my first job, that I discovered the truth. The government takes away a lot of your money. Frankly, it's shocking. And that's not even counting the mandatory $400 a month deduction for my student loans. I'll probably have that albatross around my neck for the rest of my life. Really, I can't believe my peers and I spent so much time shaming conservatives for wanting to lower taxes. A past version of myself would call this desire to keep what I earn selfish. The current, cheerfully realistic version of me knows this. I can spend my money much better than the politically correct stoners who are running the government can. So I guess, in a roundabout way, I did get something of value out of my expensive liberal arts education after all. Common sense. I'm Jay Stevens for Prager University.
All right. So in conclusion, she should wear the albatross of student loans for the rest of her life, because we definitely should raise rich people's taxes to pay for stuff like student loan forgiveness.
Yeah, and I mean, taxes, we were proposing basically a flat tax, right? Where everyone gets hit the same amount no matter what your income level is. And we're not proposing anything to help, the undue burden of those that were swindled into college, which is a real problem. But, I don't really see the solution that she's offering.
No, it just seems like the solution is just like frown and shake your fist at college. I don't like, that's all I got out of that.
Yeah, like what's her degree in? What college did she go to? Like some of that stuff could help.
So I think she said like film and
political
studies
science.
and political science, but she never said what college, which would have been a really interesting detail. All right, but the next one, surely, and I think we're not going to be able to watch all of this one because there's one I really want to get to before we go to Slovenia. But the next one, I want to at least make sure that that we watch the beginning of it, because the one we just watched, that woman was like, all right, she was just annoyed by college, but this next woman has a much more serious complaint.
I wouldn't be caught dead at a Donald Trump rally. I mean, come on. I've given money to Bernie. And yet there I was, February 2020, listening to the President of the United States address a crowd of 11,000 supporters. How in the world did that happen? Well, it all started with knitting. I knit to relax, to escape the drama of real life. But like almost everything nowadays, even knitting has become political, to the point that only those with politically correct views are welcome in the online knitting forums. You think I'm kidding? I wish I were, but I'm not. The online knitting mob is real, and like all mobs,
Okay. That's good enough. I just wanted to watch until we got to the line. The online knitting mob is real. Like, that's, look, people online everywhere are like weird assholes and go after people about nothing. That's pretty universal, right? Like we could do like the speech from Blade Runner. I've seen things on sports Twitter you people wouldn't believe, but
they don't disappear like tears in the rain.
No, they stay forever, so people can then be fired from them 10 years later.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But also, and if you want to tell somebody to knock it off, hey, if you're like going after people and you think that you're like serving social justice by doing that, you want to tell people that it's good to knock that off because it like that like alienates people you might want to win over, then I'm definitely on board with that. But like also, if you're on the other end and you're explaining why you're going from being a Bernie supporter to being a Trump supporter, and the reason, like the thing that balances out, like, I don't know if you guys remember, like Trump was president for 4 years, and yeah, it all seems like a weird fever dream, but like these are all things that happened, right? Like,
right.
Children were separated from parents by Border Patrol. We assassinated Soleimani and like came closer to the brink of war with Iran, than we ever had before. There's some stuff with COVID that it's that one's getting a little dim, but I remember it being pretty bad.
Bleach, I think, was one of them.
Yes.
Bleach under your skin.
So the thing that balances all that out is that at least by becoming a Trump supporter, like this is the good reason, this is the good enough reason to overwhelm all of the harm that Trump did, that she's getting back at the online knitting mob.
Well, I definitely recommend people Googling her and finding her video where she explains why she was canceled by the woke conservative mob. And like, I didn't commit this to memory, but I do think it was because she said that like everyone before they're born chooses what their life is going to be. So technically all Jews chose to die in the Holocaust. So she was canceled. Give the right some credit. Apparently, they canceled her over some of this stuff. But I know we got to get to the next one. Definitely check her out.
Yeah, I should say there is a video where she talks about how she was canceled by the right, but I think we decided that one's officially too mean to play because like she just seems sort of unwell. No,
I don't want to like sit here and mock her for that. Like, well, I guess I just did, but
you're willing to sit here and mock her a little bit, but like we're not going to watch a minute of that video and then like mock her for the fight.
No, because this is more like, it's funny that Prager was hosting her. Just this is her on her own individual YouTube channel. I think like anthropologically or sociologically it's interesting, but yeah, like she's just a private individual of this person. So at this point,
I mean, like that first video was on PragerU. That's fair game. Okay, all right. So we've done the pot smoking college kids are terrible. Everybody should watch Turner Classic Movies. Person who left the left. We've done the online knitting mob made her leave the left. Person who left the left. But I don't think we could really talk about people who left the left without talking about the most serious, the most intellectually formidable example. So let's just, I want to be in Slovenia in the next few minutes, but let's just quickly do that.
Do you believe in free speech? Do you believe that people should be judged by their character, not their skin color? Do you believe in freedom of religion? If you believe these things, you're probably not a progressive. You might think you're a progressive. I used to think I was. My show, The Rubin Report, was originally part of the Progressive Young Turks network. Progressives struck me as liberals, but louder. Progressives were the nice guys. They looked out for the little guy. They cared about women and minorities. They embraced change. In short, who wouldn't want to be a progressive? But over the last couple of years, the meaning of the word progressive has changed. Progressives used to say, I may disagree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. Not
Pretty sure that's a liberal.
Banning speakers whose opinions you don't agree with from college campuses, that's not progressive. Prohibiting any words not approved of as politically correct, that's not progressive. Putting trigger warnings on books, movies, music, anything that might offend people, that's not progressive either. All of this has led me to believe that much of the left is no longer progressive, but regressive. This is one of the reasons I've spent so much time on my show talking about the regressive left. This regressive ideology doesn't judge people as individuals, but as a collective. If you're Black or female or Muslim or Hispanic or member of any other minority group, you're judged differently than the most evil of all things, a white Christian male. The regressive left ranks minority groups in a pecking order to compete in a kind of oppression Olympics. Gold medal goes to the most offended. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream that his children would be judged by their character and not their skin color was a liberal idea, but these days it's not a progressive ideal. And what about religion?
Okay.
The idea that no one else can tell you what.
Since we, this is our first episode after Martin Luther King Day. I don't think that last statement could go by without comment. First, I want to answer the first two questions. Yes, I do believe in free speech, actually. And two, I completely agree that people should be judged by the content of their character. So does everybody else, by the way. Like first one might be controversial. Second one absolutely is not, right? Like nobody anywhere is saying otherwise, right? Like if the issue is judging people as people, of course you're going to judge them by the content of their character. I've been really confused for a long time about why conservatives bring that quote up in the way that they do, or what they think that what they think the policy implications of that are.
I think it's a way to embrace Martin Luther King without actually getting into all his gross socialism, war is bad, everything, incrementalism is bad, all the other stuff that he said, because that's the only thing they ever talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the most anodyne statement ever, but it's like, his, he's saying you shouldn't hate anybody because of the color of their skin. Sure, right? Yes, correct. But I think what they're getting out of that is like, oh, you shouldn't have like affirmative action programs because then like something other than, the content, But like, are people really hired based on the content of their character? like that's the primary criteria, you know, when you interview for a job, is your personal virtue.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that this involves more something that maybe we on the left do as well at times, which is taking a straw man that is like the worst version of our argument from the worst people, right? Like people who would just like, you know, say like, oh, you like, maybe there exists some tiny percentage of people that are like, all white people are inherently evil, right? But it has no like popular basis. But he's like transposing these very, very, very fringe ideas, which is like the dumbest perception of what the left would say, and then trying to like kind of like, I think the slick part is making it seem like is tying it to actual policies, like you're saying, like affirmative action, but really it's a straw man.
Yeah, which actually, you know, it's a little ambiguous because they didn't have the term yet, but there, you know, Martin Luther King certainly said some things that indicated that he would support basically what we now call affirmative action. You know, there's like a, was it Playboy interview he did like 1965, I want to say, where it says that like special compensation is appropriate, you know, when you've, you know, been you know, when you've been held back for such a long time, and etc. Right, and it's at the very least the sort of thing that somebody might say they're supporting that. It's a little unclear what he has in mind, but more importantly, okay, yeah. First, as Andy points out, you know, all of the rest of Martin Luther King's politics are things that, you know, like Rubin, or at least this version of Rubin, I think he's actually moved even further to the right since, or, you know, whatever. I don't know that Dave Rubin has thoughts, but like the words he says have moved even, you know, further to the right.
There are no thoughts in that man's head.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. But at least this version of Dave Rubin says, oh, he likes like classical liberalism, you know, like Voltaire. You know, he just doesn't like, you know, this left stuff that's you know, that's, you know, to the left of that. And okay, as Andy says, I mean, Martin Luther King advocated, you know, federal jobs guarantee, universal basic income, massive, you know, housing programs, was very opposed to, you know, the American foreign policy, said, you know, that the United States was the greatest purveyor of violence in the world in his Beyond Vietnam speech. You know, spent the last few years of his life, you know, or certainly the last part of his life, I'm not sure exactly how long, tried to organize a multiracial poor people's movement, because his analysis was that, you know, the thing now that the Jim Crow laws were gone, you know, in order to eliminate the long-term economic effects of Jim Crow, you know, you needed a multiracial movement to take on poverty per se, in some way that would be much more expansive than LBJ's war on poverty, you know, which was, you know, by the time he was assassinated, you know, I mean, that had kind of run its course, and was assassinated while going to Memphis to support striking workers. So like all of that stuff, I mean, you know, Voltaire didn't support any of that, right? Like that's like, and you know, whatever. I you know, I think it's actually a misquote. I think Voltaire didn't say it. I think it's like a biographer, like sort of paraphrasing Voltaire's views, but whatever, you know, let's say simplify and say Voltaire, right? I mean, I'm with Voltaire on free speech. That's nice, right? Like, I don't think it's the only thing that matters. I think that, like, you know, healthcare and education and, you know, blah, blah, blah also matter, but like, you know, workers control the means of production, but also like, okay, so he likes free speech so much that he's going to support the Trumpist Republican Party, that the people who are like passing laws in state legislatures to legalize running over protesters with your car, and empowering bureaucrats to fire teachers who say anything that could be interpreted as you know, too close to critical race theory, or, you know, questioning, you know, or like questioning core American ideas. Like that doesn't, you know, I'm a simple man. That doesn't sound very free speechy to me.
Yeah, do we know what he says about all the CRT stuff? I mean, I'm not too clued in on what his opinions are on that, but
whatever his teleprompter says.
Yeah, my strong guess would be that Dave Rubin's teleprompter is enthusiastically in favor of anti-CRT laws, because I don't think his core audience would like it if his teleprompt had a different view, and I think that is going to be a foolproof mechanism for predicting Dave Rubin's opinions at this point, right? Because in the last couple of years, he has cleaned out all of his, he used to, say, oh, he supported single payer, he's gone back on that. He used to say that he supported abortion rights. He seems to have gone back on that. So I'm pretty sure that anything that makes the old people who like watching him I mean, I'm not gonna, to write checks, right? Like, I think in this particular case we can say that, right? Like I'm usually not the guy who's like, oh, everybody's a grifter, but I mean, like,
there's nothing like an evening of watching Turner Classic Movies and writing Dave Rubin another check for moving farther to the right. It's an old person's ideal evening. Should we finish this up, or you think we should get to Slovenia?
Yeah, I think we should get to Slovenia. It's 8:40. So the interview, the interview is an hour and 10 minutes long, and we want to do the philosophy segment at the end, and then go to the post game. So I think we need to get going. So we cover a lot of ground. This is Zizek. Let's just say at his most Zizek-y. He has a lot of interesting things to say. He has things to, he has lots of stuff that I think is correct and insightful to say. I think he has stuff that reflects, interests in continental philosophy and Lacanian psychology that I'm not quite sure what I think about to say, but it's a really good interview. And enjoy. We'll be back live after the interview. All right. I am once again joined by Slavoj Zizek, whose new book, Heaven and Disorder, just came out. This is not what we're primarily going to talk about, but I was looking through some of these essays, and you said something that I thought was very funny in a kind of grim way in a essay called "The Danger of of Sharing a Cup of Coffee with Julian Assange."
But usually, sorry to interrupt you, but maybe this will be some interest to viewers. That I will be frank. Usually, sometimes I wouldn't say lie, but creatively enhance reality to make it more plastic, so that it expresses the idea. But you know what shocked even me, an old cheater, that there I didn't lie. It's true. Let's briefly renew it.
You're visiting Assange in prison, and the guard brought you a cup of coffee, and you took off the lid, and then put it down on the table in front of you, and you had a sip, and you put it down you do, and they said, and then maybe you put the lid back on, like they made a big deal of it, and then they,
in a very friendly way, I must emphasize this.
Sure, but in a very friendly way, they made sure immediately that you put the lid back on, and then the explanation afterwards was that because he was this dangerous prisoner, that you couldn't have, hot coffee in between you, or your safety would be jeopardized.
They may throw it into my face, yes. This is for me a simplified but perfect metaphor of where we are today. Even the way we are controlled and so on, of course, everything is done for our health, safety, profit, and so on and so on. Yes, but may I add another funny remark? I hope they will not be mad at me at our books. No, I also like the book. I think as to content, it has more diversity. It's better than my other two of these short political books with or Pandemic 1, Pandemic 2. But I have problem with the cover. Not only this Maoist identification, but look at the expression of my face a kind of embittered wisdom, you know. I look with trust and come, sorry guys, that's not me. I'm not like that. You know what I mean? I more and more believe the only thing when you are really in danger are dirty jokes.
Yeah.
Not because of potential racist content and so on, but again, my old point, when you are really in deep shit, you cannot afford what is usually called dignity. Dignity presupposes a certain safety, and I always use this example. Imagine in Auschwitz, a Nazi wants to beat you, and a poor, emaciated, half-dead Jew, what? Stands up and tears off his shirt and say, yes, do whatever you want, but you will never kill my freedom desire. It's ridiculous. You are too humiliated, too in such a horrible position that you cannot afford the spectacle of dignity. So that's why but okay, let's go on. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, that was good. So
let's follow that book, because one line of the book is also remarks on political correctness, sexual. Some people call it revolution, some people call it counter-revolution today, and so on. So not to improvise, because I noticed, when I improvise, when I think, I'm thinking freely, and that should be a general lesson, isn't the rule? It usually means that I'm repeating myself without knowing it. So the only way not to repeat myself is to look at the text and somehow at least guarantee something new. I noticed a couple of things happened to me lately, which I think are not mega important, but are an indication of where we are sadly going. First, it's a light remark, but it has something said about it, and I know it's, again, in my style, suicidal, people will claim, oh, he admits he is a sexist. I think the lesson is exactly the opposite one. A philosopher friend of mine, I will not name him, but it's from United States, not even here. I couldn't imagine that things like this still happen today. Told me via Zoom what happened to him recently. He was giving a lecture which went pretty well, but left some enigmatic point unexplained at the end. Okay. And then, obviously, a fan of him, a nice young lady, approached him after the talk and told him jokingly, if you explain all this to me at a coffee table afterwards, I will be so fascinated, like, you can fuck me, you can have sex. Now, the guy did what? He took a restrained stance and explained things to her, but with no sex. He told her that doing it to get sex as a payment would amount to sexual exploitation and so on and so on. He was very correct. Okay, they parted. Nothing happened. Then later, because he knew some other students, friends, and so on, later he learned from this lady's friend that far from being impressed by his honesty, she was furious at him. What she complained to her friend is that she really wanted sex. And she just playfully mentioned the explanation as the price he should pay to avoid the vulgarity of directly asking for sex, It doesn't look so desperate if you propose a deal. And I think such ambiguities, this happens, is what eludes the politically correct stance. What if women are not just victims of male predators, what if they also can subtly or no so subtly provoke men? And why shouldn't they do this? Why should? And this is always repeated in politically correct discourse, except for cases of rare cases. But even then, women are attacked, but it's much more ambiguous what happened. Avital Ronell and that gay person and so on. You remember 2 years ago, or when in all these archy scenes of political correctness, a woman is, as a rule, always attacked, molested by a man, and then it's all this problem of consent. It all turns around about what really is consent. Wait a minute. Why should men not give consent? Why should a woman not be the one who demands it? You can correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this practically totally absent, as far as I see? Do you know some? I'm sincerely now, it's not this arrogant rhetorical question where I'm asking you to confirm what I already know. Did you find any of these scenes of or descriptions of opposite situation? Why are women always depicted as those who have or have not to give consent? Why shouldn't women also have a desire, if they have it, for whomever, women, other women, men, and somehow express desire? That's why you may remember in one of my previous books, I forgot which one, it's not A Thief in Broad Daylight, I describe this scene in I've only seen it from outside, but I wouldn't be ashamed to go into it, although not business. You know, the cafeteria that really exists in Sao Paulo is sexual work, prostitution place, but it's incredible how it works. I cannot imagine coming closer to not feminism, but more justice, at least. You are a customer. You go in, sit at the table, and you do nothing. What's the key? Close to this cafeteria, there is a university with a large humanities department. And later there are students who need money. They sit behind the bar and they look at you. Obviously, if you sit there at the table, you want sex. They observe you. If they find you attractive enough, they come to you and, not directly, what's your price? They start a conversation with you. Usually about humanities. Do you know that there were, so I was told, even one or two who specialized in Lacanian psychoanalysis, and one of them mentioned me, I was told. Yes. How? She told this to her friends, who told to other friends who told me. And then, if they see that you are also like educated, not an idiot, then the woman, not you, says, okay, we can do it, this is my price. I mean, within this alienated institution of sexual work, isn't this pretty good? How should I put it?
Yeah, I mean, as prostitution goes, that does sound like
Let's not avoid a misunderstanding. I'm here very romantically sentimental. I am against prostitution. I may tolerate the idea, and there are persons like that, men and women, who want sex, real sex, blah, 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 with all the fantasies and so on, but with no emotional involvement.
Sure.
And the idea, and here then money is not so much a payment. It plays a role similar to the role money plays in psychoanalysis. If you pay the analyst, the function is to maintain a psychic distance, you know. You don't become friends, you don't chat, and so on and so on. And if I may repeat another old story, my favorite, Freud's big example, Wolfman, his most famous patient.
Mm-hmm.
This is a kind of a negative proof of Freud's thesis. You know that Freud was right when he said that money has a role. Namely, after the October Revolution, Wolfman, who was a Russian citizen, because of October Revolution, his family lost all money, and he was all of a sudden in Vienna with Freud, poor, with no money.
Mm-hmm.
Freud, being basically a decent, good guy, started to support him financially. The result was the fiasco of the analysis. Because, as it is expected, Wolfman became paranoid. Like, my God, why is the analyst paying me? Why? What is it in me? Does he have any plans with me?
Right.
Like Freud then learned what were these plans. Sorry, this paranoid imagination, what projected into him. A couple of times, Wolfman met Anna Freud, the young, she was still young then, Freud's daughter, on the staircase. So his paranoia was, it's almost a beautiful one, that it's all part of big Freud's plan for him to become sexual partner of his daughter. Like, he wants me to screw his daughter so that it will be somebody whom he, Freud, father, controls through psychoanalysis, so that he will control the entire situation and so on. But you see, and now comes a nicer part. You know who saved Wolfman? I forgot her name. Muriel Gardiner was a very progressive American woman who worked with Freud and was in Vienna, and then later was actively involved, risking her life in anti-fascist struggle. I don't know if you saw the movie. She was played by Vanessa Redgrave in a movie. I forgot her name. Who was the wife or the partner?
Sorry, what movie are you talking about?
I'm trying to remember it. I think it was Jane Fonda, who was that writer, my God, American writer, Dashiell Hammett, and who was the writer, I had it on the tip of the tongue, who was his partner. And she was involved in smuggling something through Germany, and in Vienna, or later she moved to Berlin, which was already Nazi Berlin. This character, Muriel Gardiner, helped her smuggle it and so on. She was a heroic leftist and very good analyst. She saved the guy, the Wolfman. She saved him. So again, the result is no goodness. Another thing, if we are here with all this stuff, consent, sex, and so on, this I found good in new Badiou's book, with which I have many problems about today's disorientation in politics, where he says that isn't the big problem of this new feminist discourse of consent and so on, that it's all about sex, very rarely, if at all more in a negative way, very rarely they touch the topic of love. I mean, but you, and especially I, would be here very open. This doesn't mean kind of a cheap religious way. Love brings us to another sacred dimension, no exploitation, no violence. No, love also can imply quite a lot of emotional exploitation, brutality, and so on. But it's another dimension. And I find it so strange that more or less, with the exception of Laura Kipnis, who already 20 years ago or when, wrote a book against love, they ignore this topic. Okay, this is my.
So I mean, I think the discussion, about prostitution and all of that. I mean, does make me think, right? I mean, like, because the version, like some of what you're describing was, okay, here's like kind of the, maybe one of the most civilized versions of it that exists, or here's a
But I'm
rule.
still against it to avoid a misunderstanding.
Yeah. Well, because I think this is interesting because it seems to me, maybe you disagree, that that a lot of the left right now has gotten a little strange on this topic. That tell
me, I'm not informed enough. Maybe I don't.
So people, I see a lot of it, like people insisting that that they'll only refer to it as sex work, and there's this sort of strange insistence that it's no more exploitative than anything, that there's just no difference, between that and other jobs, and I guess I do wonder if there's a kind of strange there's a kind of strange tension here between the way that a lot of leftists have gotten just very, very libertarian on this topic, and that kind of more general concern about consent that you're talking about, because after all, right? I mean, certainly if you're anything like a Marxist, you understand that economics can take away meaningful consent as much as anything can, right? Just
That's my first problem. Yes, because as Marx emphasized, the famous quote from Capital that market exchange is the realm of freedom, equality, and so on and so on. Yes, the first thing is this problematic neutral use of the term consent. There can be so much pressure in consent, and not just the obvious one, like I need money and formally consent. It can be other emotionally much more tricky ways to enforce consent. But again, let me repeat Lenin again. That joke, probably in one of my past encounters with you, I used it already. That joke, the idea was that it was a conversation between the sexually liberated feminist Alexandra Kollontai and Lenin, where she said among us emancipated people, sexual act should be no more than drinking a glass of water. You have a need, you satisfy it immediately. And you probably know what Lenin's answer was. Yes, but nonetheless, I wouldn't like to drink water from a glass from which another person drank water. Okay, it can be taken even a little bit conservative, but where I agree with Lenin is, it's not this, no. I want to screw my wife, not a lady only if others are not screwing her. No, it's simply an awareness that even if you can describe it as consensual exchange or whatever, sex shatters you too immediately. You're existentially too open. It never really worked like that. Or if
nothing else, it might just be unrealistic to think that human beings are ever going to not read anything into this beyond any other interaction.
Yeah, but as Alenka Zupancic, who was asked the same question, she told me at a recent debate, also pointed out there is always troubles with sex, and the desire of this consent version is again to construct a kind of a neutral sex. And my result, I know we already talked about it, is that, and I think this is the secret model of these consensual notions of sex. It's good just that it's consensual, is that there is only one version of sex which fully fits it. It's called sadomasochist contract. Now I come to a thing probably known to all Americans. It's interesting how here it was ignored. Probably it's already dying out in the States. You remember the last days of December, the nationalist rightist Steve Cortes, not my kind of a guy, tweeted a photo of AOC, Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez, her boyfriend, Riley Roberts, how they're enjoying their Christmas break in Florida. And his comment was, her guy is showing his gross, pale male feet in public, not at a pool or beach with hideous sandals. That was his comment. Now, AOC quipped back on the last day of the last year, on December 31st. I quote her. If Republicans are mad, they can't date me. They can just say that instead of projecting their sexual frustrations onto my boyfriend's feet. You creepy. End of quote. Now, as one can expect, her reply triggered mixed reactions. One user responded, and I think there is a moment of truth in it. Reactionary,
Yeah,
of course.
I agree.
Bold move. When people disagree with my policy positions or call me a hypocrite, I tell them they just want to fuck me as well. End of quote. Then another responded. This is more tricky. Another probably Republican concern. There is a moment of truth. Why did your mind automatically go to dating you and sex? That's very conceited. End of quote. I think at some level, we must admit it. This is true. It was AOC who brought sex into a situation which was at least explicitly not sexualized, reading Republican attacks on her policy positions as the expression of their frustration that they cannot date her. And incidentally, now comes my first comment. I need your open reaction here.
Okay.
I think that even if she may be right, I think she is an attractive woman, so fuck it. We are made of red flesh. We have desires.
Sure.
I think her reasoning was not correct. Don't you agree that there is another more probable version? I try to imagine it. Her Republican critics primarily disagree with her policies. But as most of men, they notice her sexual attractiveness. So they implicitly, at least, bring in sexuality to devalue her argumentation in accordance with the standard male chauvinist wisdom that women are stupid. Something like, to sex. You are nice there, avoid argumentation which is beyond your league. So I think it's not that behind political disagreement it's sex. I would like to screw her. I cannot get a chance.
It's behind the sex. There's political disagreement.
Yeah. What do you think? Please, I'm open here. It's not again.
No, I think there's probably some truth to that. I think that I would say that I do. I mean, look, I think that there's a reason why, and I definitely have some criticisms of AOC. We'll get into that, but I also do think the reason why so many people who disagree with her fixate on her. I mean, why aren't they talking about Rashida Tlaib, or why aren't they talking about other people who have all the same positions that she has? I think part of it is that I think a sexual fixation probably is part of it. I mean, that seems realistic to me. That said, I do agree with you, right? That probably that probably a lot of it is that she's a prominent figure. They hate her politics. This is something they reach for, to respond to that. And I'm not sure how serious she was about the thing about her boyfriend's feet. I think that it was
I have another problem with her. I agree with you. The enigma is, did she make this move towards sex in an ironic way, kind of a political PR manipulation, or did she really think what she wrote sincerely? My answer is she was just faking it, because if she really meant it, she's in trouble. I
think she might have thought that there's a germ of truth, but she's also having fun with it. That In other words, like she might think that in general there is something a little bit, sexual about Republicans' fixation with her, and so that's like what she's riffing off of for the joke. But she also, but that, and like because the feet thing is a little bit too perfect as a
I
setup.
will go to that. That's the true mystery. Yes. What I find problematic is that again, she brought sex into it. And that's always a dangerous move because one of the Republicans answered her very brutally. Sorry, AOC, I absolutely don't want to date you. Now, what could she have answered to this? Now, deep in your unconscious, you want to really, or whatever. But now, when you came to the crucial point, this Riley's food, really, I saw the photo, you can get it, really protrudes, sticks out a little bit excessively in the photo, which was tweeted, kind of a reference to food fetishism. But here I find things nicely ambiguous. Cortez, not she, Cortez, that Steve, the bad guy, the Republican, who made this move from AOC to Riley's foot. He didn't notice her. He noticed his foot protruding. Should have made AOC mad for another unexpected reason. I like this cynical, manipulative reasoning. I hope it was her. That she was really mad at him for not focusing on her beauty. She sees me there and look at what the guy thinks that stupid food there. The attraction of the image, that the implicit sense of her surprise why the food could be, I'm the real beauty if in the image. So why do you even mention that stupid naked food of my lover and so on and so on? And I think I would focus on this. This is very suspicious how the guy, all of a sudden, obviously talking about sex, goes to the image. But I agree with you. It is part of my non-politically correct stance that I absolutely don't disagree with such gentle manipulations and so on and so on. I'm just saying you have to be a little bit careful, no? Because you never know. I wonder, do you know, were there or not some politically correct reactions to her? I haven't followed it so much in depth.
What do you mean by that? Like what kind
I
of
believe
reactions?
it means some critical comments towards her also.
Oh, not that I've
this incident.
not that I've seen. Like nobody was trying to say that she was kink shaming this Republican for for loving her boyfriend's feet. No, I haven't.
Not about this data, but generally about that incident. She was not criticized because, again, I will put it like this. In a normal society, without this twisted political correctness, such a reaction as hers would have been normal, I think. Nice. Of course, you include this type of irony and so on. And there is a great tradition of these dirty jokes, even nicely made in American politics. I think I didn't use this one with you. You remember, no, you're too young maybe, when Edward Kennedy, Ted, the last one, before he died, he was very promiscuous, sexually active. So his position was, of course, at that point, 20, 30 years ago, already more or less ecological. For example, he was strictly opposed to offshore drilling in Louisiana.
Yes.
You know the story for oil, deep sea oil, no?
Okay.
You know what then happened? He was caught by a paparazzo on camera, sitting on a boat, eyes out New Orleans in deep water, screwing the lady, unambiguously. Her he lying on her legs around him. A couple of days later, he had a appearance in Senate. And in a reaction, you know what a Republican said? I laughed. It was a Republican senator said, "I'm glad to hear that our esteemed colleague has claimed his position of offshore
drilling."
Sorry, I mean, don't in a normal society this should be possible.
Yeah.
But you know what really worries me? Let's now drop sex a little bit and go to another much more.
Before we do that, I just you were talking about AOC, and I am curious what you think these days about AOC and the squad and all of that, because it does seem to me, right. I think that there are many sort of ultra left criticisms of AOC and the squad that are just kind of stupid. That people will, people are angry at them for not doing things they really don't have the power to do and all of that. But I do think that there is kind of a disturbing shift, maybe politically. So my friend Branko Marketic had this pointed out, these two quotes to me. This is an old tweet, but he brought it up in a conversation the other day.
AOC quote.
Yeah, exactly. So the first of these two quotes I want to read you is from AOC answering a question about the 2016 election, about Trump winning in 2016. And here's what she said then. Social instability is a direct result of wealth inequality, and bigotry is largely a result of poverty and scarcity. I know this may be hard to believe, but take refuge in the fact that sexism, racism, and xenophobia did not win last night. She's talking about Trump's victory in 2016. There were attendants to a larger stage. What won was the, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So she's making this very traditional leftist point about bigotry and demagoguery ultimately being a result of sort of misdirected anger about wealth inequality.
Yeah, this is traditional. Yeah,
sure. Okay. Now, the second quote is from AOC talking about the Trump vote. I mean, obviously he lost the election, but the large vote for Trump in 2020, right? So this is 4 years later, and she says, but we know that race is a problem, and avoiding it is not going to solve any electoral issues. We have to actively disarm the potent influence of racism at the polls. And the interviewer asked her, is there anything from Tuesday that surprised you? And she says, the share of white support for Trump. I thought the polling was off, but just seeing it, there was the feeling of realizing what work we have to do. We need to do a lot of anti-racist deep canvassing in this country, because if we just keep losing white shares and just allowing Facebook to radicalize more and more elements of white voters in the white electorate, et cetera. And all I could think, reading all this, is that this seems like a disturbing to me regression in her politics. That in the first quote, look, you can say the first quote is a little bit of an oversimplification of what happened, and there's some legitimate criticisms you could make, but I think the politics of it are so much more useful, right? Because it's staying focused on economic inequality that affects the majority of people, and that they're sort of good socialist solutions to. And the second one is all about how people are just voting for Trump because they're too racist, and we need to just somehow or another make work on the racism in their heads, in other words, the first quote suggests that the solution is to appeal to the economic interests of a majority of people, and the second quote suggests that the problem is just that people have too many problematic thoughts in their heads, and you need to fix that first. And that does seem like a big shift in her politics, and it does seem like one, from my perspective at least, in the wrong direction.
I totally agree with you, and it's also a strangely naive view. It's the old liberal democratic view that sorry, before I get confused, the tragedy is this. It's even maybe more tragic than you think, that if we were to ask her, AOC, directly, she probably wouldn't have even seen the contradiction. For her, it would simply be, yes, white people are economically poor, white, frustrated, racism is giving them an easy way out, and so on. So, okay, let's work on them, let's reconvince them, and so on and so on. I think, I totally agree with you that, sorry, I will now speak in the worst Lacanian jargon, but that she passes from this, I agree with you, simplified, but nonetheless, fundamental Marxist insight, which I think doesn't mean that you put racism into secondary role. As my friend Fred Jensen developed it nicely, you cannot talk about class struggle today in the United States without mentioning at least anti-black racism. And it's not this superficial racism of how you treat blacks. Afro-pessimists see this very well. It's a much deeper, ground-level racism practiced even by well-meaning liberals in the very way they treat blacks, even if they are friendly, they are patronizingly friendly, and so on and so on. So, but then in the second part, he changes into, sorry for this jargon, a totally different discourse. He almost speaks as an electoral campaign organizer. You know, we have a problem here, we should put more effort in this, and so on and so on. And it's not so much that I want to brutally oppose focus on class struggle and convincing people about their racism and so on, but racism itself is a much more serious thing, which you cannot simply do it by, and that's what worries me in her case. It's simply, we need better propaganda. And this is an old democratic problem. It started with Reagan, where this big shock, how comes that even poor white people or even some blacks and so on that we are losing them, that they are going to Republicans. And even, I forgot his name, some well-known semiotic linguists even followed this line, even, sorry, I forgot, getting old and senile. One of them brought a proposal to the Democratic Party.
Wait a second, you're talking about, was it George Lakoff and...
sorry. Yeah, you know, this naive idea, the problem will be solved if you follow my proposal on how to better do the propaganda and so on and so on. Now, as nonetheless a psychoanalyst, I would say that there is so much more argument than just argumentation and so on in racism. Racism is not something that you can directly fight through argumentation. Arguments are very ambiguous thing here, because as a psychoanalyst again, I would immediately add the point of enjoyment. At everyday level, racism is about stealing. Others want to steal our enjoyment. You call it these days our way of life, others as a threat, or the others enjoy in perverted ways, and so on and so on. There is no racism without enjoyment. By enjoyment, I don't mean sexual enjoyment. I mean this deep satisfaction brought about by racist and sexual fantasies and racist and sexual ritualistic practices and so on and so on. And if you combine this with, of course, economic interests and so on, you get something which is much harder to do than through mere electoral rhetoric. We have to move to this level, because my friend Adrian Johnston, otherwise Hegelian Lacanian philosopher, pointed out nicely in what strange situation we are today. So often, I will not get lost, but this is my old motive. It's not even any longer the fetishism, fetishist disavowal, in the sense of je sais bien mais quand même, I know very well, but. It's a kind of a knowledge, I quote Alenka Žapančić here, knowledge itself becomes a fetish. Let's, where you include into being racist or sexist, a reflexive awareness of what you are doing. Let's say I'm doing something which is clearly triggered by some repressed mechanisms, and then you attack me for it. And then my answer is simply, yes, I know what I am doing. I know I'm not doing what I should have done. I know. And this knowing it serves as something that enables you nonetheless to do it. I think there is a weird mechanism here of how directly against the early Marxist and Freudian presuppositions, knowledge, we have to return to these old distinctions, Freudian and Marxist, between abstract knowledge. Knowing something doesn't in itself mean liberation. Knowing something can also serve as justifying the way what you were doing before. Just you can say, no, you're not telling me anything new. I know it. And then you go on knowing it, The same problem was already detected by Freud relatively quickly, because the early Freud's idea was, I have a symptom. When you explain the meaning of the symptom to me, symptom will disappear. Then Freud noticed it doesn't work like that. You rationally accept the meaning of the system, but the symptom persists simply, So I'm not becoming here an irrationalist in the sense of deep mystical psychic change. I'm just saying there are different types of knowledge. There is knowledge where you know something very well, but it doesn't engage you personally in the sense of acting upon it. And that's, I think, the big problem today, even with ecology and so on and so on. We obviously all know it. There will be global warming, blah, blah, blah. But in some paradoxical sense, knowing it enables us to go on like before, because then you criticize me and say, yeah, I know it, and so on and so on. It's a situation which is very worrying, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that in the case of racism and Trump voters, which to be absolutely clear, of course, of course, Trump was appealing to racism quite a bit, in the.
Yeah, but at the same time, he mixed knowledge. Did you know somebody else sent me a comment, a liberal standard comment, but it in a very naive way, mostly through quotes. I forgot the guy's name. Sorry. He pointed out very nicely how, if you translate Trump into his basic, not rational, but whatever argument, racism and so on, you lose his attraction. And his attraction was not just in masking it, but in playing a joker, making fun of himself, dirty jokes, that Trump's disgusting humor is not secondary to his success. It's part of it. So you cannot say that his obscenities, dirty humor is just a secondary mask. No, it is here as a crucial moment, which also in some sense demobilizes possible critique, because Trump goes pretty far here. He says something as a joke which is racist, and then a couple of times, you remember, he did it. Then when he was attacked for racism, he said, "But don't you see, I was joking, blah, blah, blah," and so on. He was totally sleazy here, Trump. So what I'm saying is that I don't think that this direct appeal to real interest works, because the paradox of our libidinal economy desire is that we are ready to swallow quite a lot to get libidinal perverted satisfaction, even if it goes clearly and we are aware of it against our interest. Isn't an old leftist thesis that the triumph of ideology is that this famous lower classes, whatever, by voting Trump, they are systematically voting against their interests. At the end, they are the big losers of the transformation of the last decade and so on. And the paradox is that you even cannot say that they are not aware of it. It's at a different level. So here I would complicate things. But can I go to another point so that we don't run out of time?
No, I just wanted to say, just to wrap up the other point, that I think that and I mean, I think the point about ideology and self-interest is probably too interesting to get into now because it'd be too long a discussion. But I think that I do think I do wonder if we often overestimate the role of ideology as opposed to people just making short-term rational decisions about how they have no particular reason to think that more radical change is possible, and so because of it's a collective action problem, and so it's all kind of whatever, the prisoners in the prisoner's dilemma, right? They're not being irrational. It just ends up going against their self-interest. But as I said, that'd be a much longer discussion.
Sorry, allow me, very short. I agree with you. The only thing, and I hope we agree here, I would like to add is that this is not just a psychological phenomenon, but this short-term reasoning is in itself a signal of a certain global ideological situation where people simply no longer believe or take seriously any big cause you think in short terms. This short-term thinking is itself part of the situation. It's not just a psychological failure or whatever, and so on and so on. But what really, now I will conclude with an anecdote which it's embarrassing to me.
Okay.
I mean, to tell.
Sorry. Before we get the anecdote, Slavoj, can I just say I wanted to, on the point about the Trump voters, all I was going to say is that I think the problem with with focusing on the bigotry is not that it's not there. It's that what that feels like, saying like that AOC quote, the anti-racist deep canvassing, that what that feels like is, I think from the perspective of the voters you're trying to reach out to, is just kind of a moral attack, that you're telling them that they're bad people, and even if they can see your point or whatever, they're just not going to be very receptive to that. Whereas if you appeal, if you make the economic appeal, which, don't get me wrong, it's not going to work for everybody. It's not going to work for tons of people, but they have but if you make that, I think that has a much better chance of being packaged together with better, racial attitudes, because instead of just morally attacking somebody, you're presenting, just a more appealing vision of what politics should be about. And that just seems like it's going to be much more likely to entice whoever's capable of being enticed.
I agree with you here, and I give you a proof. Isn't this, when he was more active, isn't this the formula of Bernie Sanders' success? Mm-hmm. He was talking this economic language very concretely, and it's incredible what wide resonance he found. My son, younger one, who followed this closely, debate 4 years ago and so on, said that how big TV stations downplayed him, like often when he was on the show. It got much more viewers, but they tried to sidetrack him, to put him aside. It's not so. I totally agree with you. It's not that Trumpian jokes work, and then who wants to listen to these boring boring numbers and so on. No, I agree with you. Bernie did it in a way. For me, if you ask me for one scene, image even, which defines the last years, was, you remember, Trump inauguration, Bernie sitting alone there in a corner.
Yes, I should say
this became the iconic image, overshadowing all those stupid poetry and songs or whatever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I should say I really loved the from the introduction to your book. At the end of the introduction, you say, "What then is to be done? Lenin's demand for concrete analysis, the concrete situation, is today more actual than ever. No simple universal formula can provide the answer. There are moments in which pragmatic support for modest progressive measures is needed. There are moments when a radical confrontation is the only way. And there are moments when a sobering silence and a cute pair of mittens speak more than 1,000 words." So.
Yeah, but it's really a concrete situation. This is why I agree with you. I'm not dismissing in the direction of like what some radical leftists are doing AOC. Basically, her judgment was the right one without naivety. We know, and now it's becoming clear how Biden will not be able to do it. But this was a mega pedagogical experience. We had to go through it. It would have been a catastrophe to say at the beginning, no, Biden will fail, let's just oppose him, and so on and so on. Because, these failures are never pure, simple failures. Failures leave traces. Here I disagreed years ago with Badiou when there was Occupy Wall Street. He said, just they were the true 1%, just a couple of relatively rich, educated sons. But I agree here, with Chomsky, who said, yeah, they failed. It dissipated, disappeared. But it left a trace, somewhere in, I will not use this obscurantist term, public unconscious, but there is a kind of a deep working public political memory. All this remains. So I'm not. So can I just to conclude? You can then cut it.
Yeah.
Yep. Now comes the disgusting thing, and when I say disgusting, I really mean. Sorry, just that I find it. I really mean disgusting. Where are we today? But it's a necessary part against this new poverty and so on. On January 8, 2022, now, less than a week ago, Yahoo reported that reality, I wonder if you noticed this, that a reality star made $200,000 from, should I use the F word, the other one, not fart, from selling her farts in Mason jars. Now, she was eating so much bean and so on to produce enough farts. So now it hurt her body. So now she is selling it through NFTs as NFTs. That is to say, you just buy it so that you symbolically own a unique fart art. Now, what I find so fascinating, this is for me almost the truth of NFT. How millions, even if you take all of NFT, it's already billions of dollars are being spent, but in a way which, my God, we would have to think about it, what property means and so on. Because as some analysts pointed out, NFT is a crazy attempt to introduce artificially scarcity into a domain where everything in principle could have been for free floating. And the madness, the paradox is that it doesn't even mean real scarcity, like documents still circulate freely and so on. And you can even make an NFT of an object which doesn't, you even don't have to prove that this object really exists. So it's really a point of madness of how it's not only financial speculation, but the object of speculation itself becomes purely virtual. It's not necessary to be there. Now, I'm not saying this is a perversion of a true function of money. I read somewhere a wonderful analysis arguing against, you saw, of course, you are a civilized man, you saw the movie or the novel Goldfinger, James Bond.
Yeah, I've seen Goldfinger.
The idea of bombing the gold reserves. The idea is if they are bombed by a nuclear bomb, they are radiated, they cannot be used. So those who have real gold, their gold will be 40 times more gain in value, 40 times more expensive, and so on and so on. But I read a nice analysis which says, but why? I mean, the way, where is it in Kentucky somewhere, my God? Where is all the gold stored now? Most of the gold in, how is that place called? Sorry.
All right, Fort Knox, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, Fort Knox, sorry, I'm getting old and still. But okay, but it doesn't really matter. You know what those in power should have done? What if they succeeded in blocking the news that Fort Knox is radioactive, we don't have access to gold there? Nothing would have changed because we don't use that gold. It just has to be there, presupposed as something, You have, from the very beginning, this virtual dimension where basically you can cheat. Even rich people are doing this. I was always fascinated by this. You know that many stars who have, let's say, an ultra expensive diamond necklace. You make a perfect copy, and then you have the real necklace in the bank or in the safe. But, like, you can cheat in principle. What I'm saying is that is that some mad dimension, which was from the beginning there, is now exploding openly. And what fascinates me is that on the one hand, we have real needs, hunger, global warming, but on the other hand, we have these explosions. It's no longer marginal, it's billions of dollars already in this virtuality. It makes me really sad. Now, the last thing, just to conclude, this brings us to the role of the state. Again, it's so fashionable to say again and again how, state is just a puppet, incorporation, and so on. But my good friend, I mentioned him already, Alvaro Garcia Linera, the ex-vice president of Andrés Morales of Bolivia, who is also a great theoretician, he, as a Marxist, he emphasizes this, drew attention to how surprising a thing, at least in the first couple of months, the COVID pandemic was, that something unheard of happened. Can I read this quote? It's long, but it's wonderful. For the first time in human history, vast numbers of people across the world have agreed to abandon their paid activities, to stop attending public nation state, and so on. One should be here absolutely without any prejudice. Okay, sorry, I don't want to, to stop attending public gatherings and confine themselves in their homes for weeks and months. We are living in a kind of general planetary strike, which has paralyzed most of the transport, commerce, production, services. People have accepted confinement when asked to do so by the state institution which justify the measure as a way to stop the spread of coronavirus and so on and so on. And Linera then points out that it wasn't, as Agamben thinks, the terror of the state. In many cases, in my own country, in UK, I remember, people wanted harsher measures. Bearing in mind the interest of economy, state didn't want to do it. But what Linera is right to point out, it is that, at least in the first, do you remember, month of panic, on the one hand, society down there was in a panic, people, millions losing jobs, companies, especially small companies, disappearing, and so on. There was a confusion. Internationally, states behaved in an egotistic way, international cooperation didn't work, blah, blah. So wasn't it this a kind of the greatest moment of state power? Weren't we all looking automatically towards state that, my gosh, society is a mess, only the state can do it? And Linera's conclusion, I love it as an old totalitarian, is not just this was an illusion and so on. But no, of course, what the state then effectively did was they did meet some of these demands, a little bit of money to people. They also did the work for capital and so on and so on. But Linera's conclusion is that we, the left, shouldn't wait for some authentic anti-state revolution, but we should gather the courage to admit that in future critical situations, new pandemic or global warming, panic, fires, public authority is for us now, at least, the big agent which can really do it. Some friends of mine, like Badiou again, is here against state and for local communities. He said the solution to global warming and this ecological problem is that local communities take care. Independent committees of local, what are we doing, are we polluting, and so on and so on. I don't think this works. For a simple reason, we already talked about it, I think. Remember that ultra heat in southwest Canada, northwest United States, Seattle to Vancouver, last summer, almost 50 degrees Celsius. You cannot deal with this locally because it was absolutely clear, demonstrated by science, that this was a local effect, but this effect was the result of global disturbance of air currents and so on and so on. They may be doing many horrible things, people of there, but they were not responsible for this. They even established a nice model of how a global disturbance could then, when something is blocks the normal air, large mass of air movement, then gives birth to this extreme locally. So again, I don't think local self-control, local communities controlling themselves is a solution. No, because the phenomenon is global, the causality is global. In this book, I think, or somewhere else, I take another example. In southern Chile, they have for a couple of years now terrible drought. But they're not doing anything. There are a little bit of agriculture. And scientists established a model, again, also in the southern hemisphere, how air currents are, and the temperature of the ocean, all this led to drought there. So again, I'm not magnifying the state or naively believing in state. I'm just saying in situations of crisis, really global crisis, when really scared, imagine, for example, even worse temperatures and so on. Like, I don't know, terrible heat up to over 50 degrees and so on. Now, when people will be in a panic, in today's situation, who can do it but the state? Maybe we will afterwards have another solution. But that's why, and that's Linera's point, being fully aware of all the problems with state and so on, alienated, blah, blah, we shouldn't be afraid to use it as an instrument, maybe even against itself. It would be madness to pursue in this Badiou line of the authentic politics takes place outside of the state is alienated. Yes, with this, but in desperate situation, we can use, as Linera points out nicely. Nonetheless, in some countries with popular pleasure, the state did some good things and so on and so on and so on. So we should here, I think, the crisis to come will force us to change this paradigm of what is authentic politics and to, well, in some sense, rehabilitate nation states or even transnational authority as the only way to cope with the problems we are approaching. And definitely, and here I wanted to speak with Albert, your friend.
Mhm.
Like, what would his answer be here? Like,
That is a very good. Yeah, that's a very good question because
if he for this anarchist local approach, okay, what would he advise to do to the people? There are other worse examples, but let's say to the people in Seattle and Vancouver the last summer. This is not their problem. It didn't come from space. No, it came as a global result of this great perturbance, which is now happening everywhere. Do you know that? We talked about it already, that at the same time in northern Siberia, in a city close to Arctic Ocean there, where winter temperatures are usually record low, up to minus 50 degrees Celsius. Last summer they had 34. No, I don't want to raise panic. Nobody knows what is happening. But the absolutely only solution I see here is science, global cooperation, and so on and so on. And when people say science is dogmatic with regard to pandemic, no, science is now openly admitting, this is what I like now, all the confusion with Omicron. Isn't science, the official science, more or less openly saying, sorry guys, we are more and more discovering how many things we don't know. So I would like to have a science which would be able to be more dogmatic. No, everybody knows science cannot do it. I mean, they are saying no. And I don't think this can be back translated into, yes, because they are slaves to big pharmaceutical companies who would like to vaccinate us again and again. No, it's not as simple as that. There are signs of genuine panic.
Yeah.
We did whatever we want. Please, I hope I was not too bad. Again, I repeat to you, be a good censor.
Yeah, I love being a good censor as the cutoff point. You know, like we're just censoring something he said after that, as opposed to just turning off the recording. But in any case, that was a lot of fun. There's a lot to say about many things that came up in that conversation, but instead of saying any of them right this second, because we do need to get to the philosophy segment with Jen, and then the post game for patrons. Remember where Ethan Hershenfeld is going to, we're going to watch some Ben Shapiro and William Lane Craig clips with him. Should be a good time. But first, I want to play a quick preview of the patron episode from last Saturday, just as a quick reminder. Thank you, Ethan, for that super chat. I will ask Slavoj about all his coffee preferences in the future. Really should have worked that into the Julian Assange story, but in any case, just as a reminder, If you sign up as a GTAA patrons, that's patreon.com/Ben Burgis, BenBurgis. You get a post game after the regular show every Monday night, as well as a patron exclusive episode that comes out on Saturdays in both video and podcast form, as well as a bunch of other stuff. But most importantly, you support the work that we do here. So if you like what we're doing and you want us to do more of it, please do consider doing that. But meanwhile, let's watch I just had so the last Patron episode, I didn't do one last Saturday, but the last Patron episode was a conversation that I had with Conrad Hamilton about his manifesto for post-pandemic politics. Let's watch just a minute of it now, and then we'll be back with Jen.
First, let's set it up. I mean, the manifesto itself, like why, there'll be a link in the description, but I mean, why did you write it? Like, what's the kind of overall thesis?
Well, I mean, I think, I should say that this is the Manifesto for Post-Pandemic Politics, which I published at first with Triple Ampersand, associated with the New Center for Research and Practice. And it was attributed to the ILEDA Collective, partly because of, I think, the generosity of some of the editorial revision that I had. I am the principal author of the text, but partly because the manifesto evolved out of a lot of collective conversations that were going on in groups like Capital Comrades, which you're an admin of, just a little plug there. But in terms of the structure of the manifesto, I'll just try to be sort of brief. What I point out at the beginning is that we've mostly, been dealing with, since this manifesto broke out, two kinds of political responses, right? I think one of them, which is, sort of right authoritarian, and another, which is kind of neoliberal. Right. And the right authoritarian one, very often will say like, whatever, people die. That's life. Kids these days don't know what it's like. Right. Which is pretty sordid, I think. The neoliberal response tends to err in the direction of wanting to announce or proclaim a sort of short-term commissarial dictatorship, right, in order to get our standard capitalism back and running again. But, I think what this pandemic has really shown is that we need more than that. Right. There's a lot of, deep-seated aspects, of our capitalist structure, which have contributed to the pandemic, to the point that I know Roberto Finelli's even called it a syndemic, like partly a social sort of thing. But, we could talk about, underfunding of viral research, years of cuts to Medicare, overdependency on consumer consumption, consumer economy, all these kinds of things. So from there, I kind of move into a critique of different positions which have been adopted toward the pandemic. On one side, I critique, sort of the populist left, Sanders, Corbyn, and so forth for, not, I feel, channeling, enough some of the anger which exists, and which is particularly emphatic, I think, in this moment, for mistaking, as I say, the form of electoralism for the content of class struggle. I also criticize the anti-vax kind of position and the position of Giorgio Agamben, who I point out as well seems to have this sort of trans-historical and malevolent view of sovereignty that prevents him from, I think, appraising properly, the contributions of anti-capitalist states, but also foreclosing really what could be a constructive governmental response to this pandemic. Because as I say, we need to use the state, right? In order to stave this off. We don't really have a choice.
All right, that was Conrad Hamilton. I should say, by the way, that Conrad is one of the co-authors of a book called Myth and Mayhem, a leftist critique of Jordan Peterson.
I've seen that book around here.
Yeah, I believe you have your own copy of that book.
I do. Oh! Carry on.
Yeah.
Carry on.
So me, Matt, Conrad, and Marion Trejo McManus.
Wait, is that Comrade Conrad?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Comrade Conrad. So me, Matt, Marion, and Comrade Conrad all wrote parts of that book. And Slavoj Zizek actually wrote the introduction to it.
Nobody asked me to write part of it.
Do you want to?
Not at all.
So there you go.
Hi, J. Andrew. Dig myself out of this hole.
Yeah. So anyway, you should check that book out and check out, check out the Patron episode with Conrad. Again, patreon.com/Ben Burgis, and you get all that good stuff, as well as the satisfaction of knowing that you are, helping us to
Keeping Lucy and dog food.
Yes, you're keeping Lucy and dog food and Shabazz and cat food, us and people food, and you're keeping the show going, so we can continue to do stuff like we are doing tonight. But let's do the philosophy segment. We should
Let's do it.
Yeah, we should probably get to the post game with Ethan Hershenfeld before too much longer. But not last week, because there wasn't an episode last week, but week before last in the philosophy segment,
They missed me.
yeah, we were talking about Larry Taunton a little bit. So he, remember, is the dude who wrote The Faith of Christopher Hitchens, The Restless Soul of the World's Most Notorious Atheist. And that is a book I talk about a bit in this book. Christopher Hitchens, when he got right how he went
That
right,
was
still matters. I know, wasn't
Slick.
it? And he says a lot. Taunton says a lot about philosophy that's wrong, and we got into a little bit of it last time, but there's more to go.
There's more.
So let's set this up a little bit. There's a thing in the book where he's talking about Christopher Hitchens's relationship with his brother Peter, who's actually the main guest, the main interview a couple weeks ago. And I think we have the first quote from Taunton's book here, where he's talking. Oh, actually, no. Do we? All right.
What?
Jake, what's the first quote we have? I'm sorry.
Help us, Jake.
I got mixed up. That's my bad.
Jake.
Oh no, Jake.
I consider the Wednesday Addams thing to be a compliment, so I appreciate that.
There we go. Okay, so earlier, I guess we don't have this first quote, but earlier there was one about Christopher's relationship with Peter, where they quoted, there's some back and forth between the two of them because they disagree on many, many things.
Antonio, do you want to get blocked, or how do you think this works around here?
So Christopher and Peter disagree about many, many things. Remember, when was interviewing, Peter reminded him of the line in Hitch 22, where Christopher says that Peter's book, Broken Compass, included assertions that the reactionary felt the need to wear a necklace of garlic to read it. But in one of these back and forth articles, Christopher says something very nice about Peter, which is that he says he thinks that one difference between them is that he's pretty sure that if he died and he needed, then Peter would be willing to like sort of shoulder the responsibility of raising his children, and he's not sure he would be able to, to do vice versa. So it's a very kind thing to say, but Taunton interprets that as being like, aha, see, he's admitted that that because of his godlessness, he isn't this is Peter being a good Christian would be willing to do this, but
I want y'all to just consider for a minute which one of us would be more likely to take in somebody's kids, because it ain't me.
Yes.
And who here's the atheist? Also not me. But I ain't taking in y'all's kids.
So I guess we're the opposite of Peter and Christopher Hitchens. But in any case, and then this leads into this discussion of how Larry Taunton and his wife adopted this HIV positive Ukrainian orphan, and there's this section of the book where Taunton is describing this conversation he has with Christopher Nutt. I believe that's the quote that we had earlier, mistakenly. All right. Taunton reports Hitchens saying, quote, "I'm glad there are people like you in the world. I really am, but I cannot for the life of me understand why you would do it." Now, keep in mind the larger context of this, for anybody who missed the previous segment, is that Taunton was somebody who Hitchens would debate about religion, but they also became friends, or at least.
I don't know how friendly that seems right there.
At least Hitchens certainly seems to have thought they were friends. So
maybe they were friends during the lifetime.
let's put it that way. But then after Hitchens dies, Taunton comes out with this book, the Faith of Christopher Hitchens, and after quoted that, right, that I don't know how you can do it. They, in other words, adopt, this HIV positive Ukrainian orphan. It's going to take all of this, sacrifice and everything. I'm glad there are people like you in the world. I really am, but I couldn't do it. This is how Taunton riffs on that in the book. "Had any Christian friend of mine said such a thing," Taunton writes, "I would have been disappointed. A Christian would know why Laurie and I or anyone else would want to adopt an orphan, because our Lord commands us to take care of those for be called the least of these. The point isn't that every Christian must or should adopt. It is rather that every Christian must or should know why we would do so. If, however, you are an atheist, where exactly is the moral imperative? If this world is all there is, why not milk this life for all that you and you alone can get out of it? Christopher knew that very well. There was no compelling reason not to do precisely that."
Well, that's what Ben's doing. Clearly.
Yeah. No.
And I am for people adopting over having kids, and I'm for me doing neither one. Darius.
Yeah. So I think there are a couple things to say here. Yeah, no, that is how I live my life. I have, Jen asked me for a favor. I said, no. I'm milking life for all you can give me and me alone.
It would be better for you is if you did me the favor. That would actually work out better.
So it seems like there are a couple things to say here. One of them, we talked about this before, so we don't need to do a big thing here, but it is worth pointing out, is that I really want to do. In fact, I actually want to go door to door, like an evangelist, to tell people like Larry Taunton about the Euthyphro dilemma.
Please don't.
Because this idea that, if you don't believe in God, where's the moral imperative? It seems like, again, this is not groundbreakingly original. Plato said this 24 centuries ago, more or less. It's
give or take.
Give or take. Well, okay, is it a moral imperative because God wants you to do it? Or does God want you to do it because it's a moral imperative? And if God wants you to do it because it's a moral imperative, then...
What? I was just why not, though? I thought that's how we answered that.
Sorry. I forgot about the Charlie Kirk solution to the Euthyphro problem. Anybody who missed that, I'm not making that up. He really did say that. But
there's a whole song about it.
There is. Hannah Hoffman made a song about Charlie Kirk's solution to the Euthyphro when I brought it up in our debate. But if you say God wants you to do it because it's a moral imperative, then it must be a moral imperative for some reason other than God wanting you to do it. If, on the other hand, it's only a moral imperative because God wanting you to do it, then if God had preferred that you...
Sticking hot needles into the eyes of newborn babies, which was not my original example, but one that one of my professors at the University of Houston like to use.
Or we could make it specific that that when you find out that a HIV positive Ukrainian orphan needs a home, you should track her down and stick hot needles in her eyes, like
she got it bad enough already.
Well, that's the point, right? Though we all think that would be immoral, but we only, if hypothetically God had wanted you to do that, would that be morally better than adopting her? It seems like no.
This is taking a very dark turn.
Sorry. There's a DeVos had wanted us to how does Kirk solve this again?
Why not both? Porque no los dos.
Yeah. Anyway, so I also think so. To that one thing, three things here. One, Larry Taunton needs to read the Euthyphro. Two,
he needs to read a book about how to be a friend.
Yes,
is another thing he needs.
Two, he's not a very good friend. The better friends don't actually write books like this about their friends after they die. That's not you're not getting any friendship awards for that one. But but the third thing is, I think he was missing what Hitchens was saying.
A little bit.
Like,
he was very literal in his interpretation. Very, very literal.
Yeah. I don't think that Hitchens was actually saying that, like, in that, I'm sure if you
the reasoning behind why someone would do this eludes me.
Right. Right, exactly. I don't think he was saying, I don't understand what reason you would have to do this. In fact, I think if you look at the whole statement, he says, I'm glad there are people like you in the world. I really am. That suggests that he understands exactly why people would do this, and he approves. I think what he was saying was, I don't know that I could do this, which, seems like we all have our limitations.
Yes, we do.
It's a good thing to be aware of them. And this particular limitation, I think even Larry Taunton would admit, is not the kind of limitation that makes you a bad person. That, in fact, it's not even that, because I think even Larry Taunton doesn't believe, in fact, he says in the quote that he doesn't believe, that everyone has a moral obligation to find an HIV positive Ukrainian orphan and adopt them.
How many of those are there?
Yeah, there's probably aren't enough for everyone, but it's probably not that 50% of the human race is HIV positive Ukrainian orphans and the other 50% can adopt them. But it's not that everybody has an obligation. It's not that you have an obligation to do this, right? Even Taunton doesn't believe that. It seems like what probably both Hitchens and Taunton thought was that it was, what's the fancy philosophical term here?
Supererogatory. I know. He loves it when I talk like that.
So, supererogatory is philosopher speak for above and beyond the call of duty.
Morally good, but not morally required.
Right. Which I think is probably how we all think of adopting people in desperate situations, that we don't think that everybody who hasn't done that has done something wrong by not doing so. But we think, of course, it's praiseworthy to do it, but that doesn't.
It's not blameworthy if we don't do it.
Exactly. So Larry Taunton, to wrap up, needs to
learn what it is to be a friend.
Learn what it is to be a friend. You learn about supererogation. Learn about the Euthyphro dilemma. So those would be, Larry. If you're
your summertime reading right there.
If you're watching this, those are the three things that I think you need to work on. The cat has a lot to say.
He's yelling, "Why not both?" because he thinks it's funny.
Sure. All right. We're going to go to the post game for patrons, where Ethan Hershenfeld, anybody who listens to the David Feldman show, will know who this guy is. He usually comes on right after me on the show, and he wanted to be on the show, so we are going to subject him to
being on the show.
Yeah. We like to, when people are nice enough to want to come on, we perversely subject them to horrible viewing. So we're going to make him watch some clips of Ben Shapiro, William Lane Craig, some of which continues a little bit of the thread of what we've been talking about, but it should be a good time. So I will, be back there with Jake, our producer, Andy, our graphic designer, and Ethan Hershenfeld. So see you there.
Team Snoopy forever.
Left is best.